So today we're going to learn to sing like Axl Rose. So like this guy, basically. We're going to keep this real simple. There are three, there we go, that's the right number of fingers. I got this. There are three things you need to know if you want to sound like Axl Rose. Even if you don't, these are actually really useful things to know that you can use to color your voice in any sort of situation that would call for it. After all, choices make the artist. So expand your choices and you expand your artistry. As a matter of fact, as an opera singer, I use some of these things. Anyway, these three things are the area epiglottic sphincter, we're just going to call it AS for short, the false folds, and you need to know how to use very little air. And I mean very little. And we're going to actually use an exercise that helps facilitate that, as well as I have some other videos on the channel for breathing issues in general. So yeah. Oh, it's time to sing like Axl Rose, yeah! All right, so how do we do it? First, let's cover the airy epiglottic sphincter, the AES. All right, here is what you're going to need to know in order to isolate this muscle, which is a sphincter. Sphincter. I know, it's weird. But anyway, we're going to learn to contract this sphincter. We're going to isolate the AES. We're going to do one of two things. We're going to find a very nasal, well, not one of two things. We're going to do both of these things. There we go. I know how to do this. I'm good. All right. So you're going to hold your nose and you're going to make a very sound. Like that. It sounds terrible by itself. I know. Trust me, I know. But get used to sounding terrible when you're doing singer exercises. Like, I promise you, the more absurd the exercise in singing, usually the better. So let's just go along with it and tolerate the fact that it sounds like bad. Really bad. For now. So this is one ingredient. Have patience. All right, we're closing our nose. Why are we closing our nose? When we unpinch our nose, if the sound changes, that means we're making a nasally sound by drooping the soft palate. For this style, you want the soft palate elevated. So that's why you have the nose test. So, that's with it up, and that's with AES. This is AES with the soft palate down. When I pinch my nose, the sound changes. So you want to be able to isolate that sound with a lifted soft palate. If the sound doesn't change when you pinch your nose, that's how you know it's lifted. That by itself is probably not enough. We're going to need to practice that. Isolating this muscle will take time. This is not a how to sound like Axl Rose quickly video. It's how to sound like Axl Rose the right way, like how he actually does it. So the greatest exercise that I can think of would be, yeah. Yeah. If you're thinking, wow, that sounds like Fran Fine, that's because Fran Fine uses AES. And if you're thinking, I don't know who Fran Fine is, then I'm old, as my wife laughs at my age. Fran Drescher. Fran Fine. Fran Drescher. Oh, okay. It's just the name on the show is fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Her last name is Drescher. She actually sounds like that in real life too, right? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Fran Drescher. Look her up if you don't know. It's a great show.
Watch the Nanny.
Watch the Nanny. All right. Anyway, back to Axl Rose. Okay, so that's going to take some time for you to learn, but it's not the only thing. So let's talk about the second thing, which are the false folds. What are the false folds? False folds are two pieces of cartilage that exist above the vocal folds. You are going to need to know how to retract them and contract them. There is not necessarily an on or off switch for this. There is closed and open and everything in between. And you're going to need to know how to manipulate that if you want the flavor that Axl Rose is able to put in, specifically, definitely in some of the recordings. He'll add or take away the false folds. So, but first, before we get into the how, let's understand what they sound like. So let's do it without AES, and then we'll do it with AES. So this is without AES. There's a little bit of AES in there. That's very open, very classical sounding. And again, that's all the way wide open. Closed, they sound very different. Very more speech-like. And if I add the AS in there, then we get this kind of sound. So that's pretty extreme in terms of flavor, right? And that's just those. So now that the how, right? How we get to these false folds is I'm going to actually encourage you to have a nice relaxed moment with your morning cup of Java. And you're going to pay attention again above the vocal folds. Maybe even like it's going to happen if you feel your throat, you feel your larynx, a little bit on the top of the larynx, right? But for now, just enjoy that smell of coffee. And if you love the smell of coffee, whatever your poison is, pick something you enjoy smelling. Maybe you're cuddling your dog and you just want to get a big whiff of doodle. Yeah, I'm talking to you, dog. She's a good dog. Anyway, take that inhale, that lovely and this will expand. That is the muscle. And you first have to identify what it is and where it is, and then we can talk about contracting and opening. The smelling, that's opening. That sounds like this. It's almost like a radio commentator. I know English, I know words. And so you want to be able to open that. Ah, yes. And then when you want to get serious and point it at somebody, you can keep that open, or you can close it and get a little stiff and get a little narrow, like that. And you want to practice opening and closing that. Now again, this takes time. You will have to practice this. I would say that the best way, once you've isolated the sensations of open, which I have now, versus closed, which I have now, which is a lot more speech-like. Open, closed, closed. There we go. I practice so much with open, it's hard to close them. There's closed. You have to practice these sensations. Best to do it in speech, but once you have it, here's the singing exercise that you can use. E, open. So we're going E, A, O. We're trying to get vowel uniformity. We're trying to get those vowels to maintain their ease, their forwardness. That's why we're starting on E, okay? And then, so we have that open, then we want it closed. E, A, O. And I put a little bit of AES in there because I don't really practice these coordinations a lot, which I should start. Take my own medicine, you know what I mean? Anyway, okay. Now, the third thing is probably the most important. If you're going to take anything away from this video, I actually want you to take this away, okay? To do what Axl Rose does, you need so little air that we're actually going to skip the straw exercise, which is the normal straw phonation exercise that I recommend, which uses a normal size straw, and we're actually going to use a coffee stir. This is hard. This is very hard to do. But the reason I'm insisting that you learn it is for vocal safety. Contraction of the false folds is already putting some strain on your voice, okay? It's the sound of rock and roll inherently. You need it if you want to sound like a rock singer, period, the end, of any style. They all have closed folds, or false folds. But in order for that to be safe, you need to have very, very, very little air. Similarly, the AES actually restricts you from using too much air. It literally closes and narrows the passage. So breath pressure becomes an issue if you cannot manage it. This is the ultimate test for this. And I'm actually convinced that this is why Axl Rose does that little dance that he does, if you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I just look like an idiot. But I do all the time anyway, so who cares? Anyway, coffee stir. Sing in your lower register with this, and you will immediately know when you are using too much air, because singing will become impossible. I never said sounding like Axl Rose was easy. It's actually quite hard. But if you want to hit the notes that he hits in things like Sweet Child of Mine, you need mastery of air. That's true of high notes in general, but it's exacerbated in the same way that I gave the wrong emphasis to the wrong syllable, like in English. Probably didn't even spell coffee stir right. Who cares? Anyway, sounding like Axl Rose is hard. You're going to need to practice all three of these things, and diligently. If you're stuck, If you don't know what to do, if the exercises I've given are not enough guidance for you, which is fine, by the way. Sometimes people need a little extra help, and sometimes you need a little bit more than one trick to find an exercise. I can't shove a bunch of exercises in one video for you, but good news. I have a Discord. Link to that down below. I make myself available to hear recordings. You can send them privately if you're shy, which is totally understandable. And you can just hit me up with any questions. And I usually make videos for people specifically. And in fact, this is actually for a student who wanted to try a few new things to try. Anyway, until next time, happy singing. And don't be afraid to reach out.